Today is a great little amazing incredible day, and I'll tell you why. Because it is a Sweden day. How dangerous is Stockholm? Let's visit a Stockholm no-go zone. Without further ado, let's get into this reaction. Let's go.
How dangerous is Stockholm? That's actually a question that's pretty difficult to answer. Decades ago, I would have said that's actually a question that's pretty difficult.
Sorry, I'm just looking at these. What are these people? Are they police officers? They're really interesting hats. Really cute. I like the hats. I shouldn't be calling police officers cute. They should be serious people that I'm scared of. But I just like these little sailor hats they've got on.
Difficult to answer. Decades ago, I would have said that Stockholm and Sweden in general is extremely safe. But these days, well, things are changing. In the last years, Sweden has seen gang wars, rising tension between immigrants and Swedes, and an elevated risk of terrorism. People have been gunned down or had their apartments blown up with explosives. But
whoa, hold up, say what? People are being gunned down and apartments blown up with explosives. Now, guys, do not worry. I am not like looking at this and be like, oh my god, Stockholm is terrible. There's parts of London where stuff you do not want to step. You do not want to go because you're probably going to get stabbed or probably going to get your phone taken from you. You just don't want to be in these areas. So I'm not surprised that in Stockholm you have those areas as well. It's a capital city. It is what it is. But it's good to know where not to go. When I'm a tourist and I'm traveling, I need to stay away from certain areas. And I will be staying away from those certain areas. Just like if I was in London, there's certain areas that I would stay away from as well.
on the other hand, the vast majority don't notice anything at all about that, myself included. Today I'm gonna visit one of the so-called no-go zones in Stockholm and talk about how dangerous Stockholm really is. In 1968, a new suburb of Stockholm was built called Rinkeby. It's a typical example of the Million Program. Sweden had a housing shortage in the 1960s, and the government decided that 1 million new homes would be built. The idea was to offer high-quality, affordable housing for everyone, but that's not exactly how things turned out. The Million Program houses weren't very nice looking, but they did provide quality housing at affordable prices. Most people wanted to live someplace nicer, though. That meant that many of the Million Program areas became filled with lower-income families and with immigrants. And that's what happened with Rinkeby. By the 90s, it was infamous as a place where mostly immigrants lived. These days, 17,000 people live in Rinkeby, and 62.2% of them are born outside of Sweden.
Wow, 62.2%. That's a lot of people born out of Sweden, and they all live in Rinkeby. Okay. There's areas like that in London, though. Like, for instance, there's Peckham, Brixton, Croydon, especially Croydon. There's areas where it's just majority immigrants or people born outside of the UK living there. So,
and 92.1% have a foreign origin, such as having immigrant parents. Rinkeby, together with nearby Tensta and Hu.
Is that what that means? A foreign origin means having parents born outside of the country. It's funny because my parents were also born in England. So does that mean I'm not of foreign origin? It's a weird term. Of foreign origin. So interesting. It's weird. It's like how we identify ourselves. I find it strange because obviously my race, I'm black. That's my race. Yeah. But my parents were born in England. So, you know, I grew up in England. I went to the same schools as white people. So it's just strange. It's just like, and then my grandparents were born in the Caribbean, which were Jamaica, British Jamaica at the time. So it was owned by the Brits. Their parents were born in British Jamaica and had British passports. Their parents were either there were some that were slaves from Africa, and the rest of them, because I have a mixed race heritage, were British from Scotland. So I have like ancestors from Scotland. So technically I can trace my ancestry back to the United Kingdom and probably back to the Vikings. Probably back to So I just find it's really strange, isn't it? Like how people identify or how you see yourself and how other people see others. Even though we're so closely related as human beings, we other people due to external factors. Oh, that person's got brown skin, so they're like this. Although we're more similar than we realise. It's strange. Sorry, I've gone off on a tangent, but it's not... I like, everyone sees race, but it's just weird. Probably if an alien from outer space saw how we treat each other, they'll be like, are you guys... Have you lost your mind? You're all the same. You've all got blood running through your veins. You're all humans. They wouldn't see race. They'd be like, you're a human being. You're an earthling. Anyways, I digress. Let's get back to the video.
Husby is an example of what people call a Stockholm no-go zone. When foreign people talk about Stockholm no-go zones, they imagine a lawless area where gangs roam the streets and gun down anyone who goes there. Reality is a bit different. Rinkeby, together with other places like Tensta, Husby, Vårby and Norsborg, is a low-income area with high unemployment. That of course leads to a higher crime rate, more drug use and an increased police presence. But there's no place in Sweden that's a literal no-go zone. People visit these areas and the police frequent them. The term no-go zone is just propaganda. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to be careful. Overall, Stockholm is a safe city and Sweden is a safe country, but there's crime either way. You can still get pickpocketed in Stockholm, or scammed, or even mugged. And you might find yourself assaulted if you're walking all alone late at night in a dark alley. None of this is common, but it can happen, just like it can happen in any city.
Yeah.
But what about the...
It just sounds like it's just like any other capital city, like... London's the same. You just got to use your common sense. Don't walk at night. Don't walk on your own. Don't flash your phone and your any expensive items like
explosions and the gun violence that the news has been talking about. Is Stockholm turning into a war zone where people duck for cover in between the lovely architecture and the lush greenery? Well, not exactly. There seems to be two schools of thought about all of this. One is that there's a greater frequency of gun-related violence and bombings that could affect anyone, so everyone needs to be afraid, because it could happen to you. The other is that all of these crimes are related to gang rivalries, and it doesn't really affect normal people. It's just gangs eliminating each other. The truth is, as always, somewhere in between. I'm not a big fan of painting things in either black or white. There's always too many nuances to take into consideration. Sweden does have a gang problem. We've been way too relaxed about gang-related crime, so now it's all caught up with us, and we're sitting here with our pants down by our ankles. Normal people have been killed by these gang wars, and at least one apartment has been blown up because they thought that it belonged to a rival gang member.
What?
But it was just some poor random person who lived there. And if we don't do anything about it, it will just get worse. More people will get hurt, and the gangs will get a stronger foothold. But on the other hand, does this mean that you have to be worried when you're visiting Stockholm? Of course not. I spend most of my days in the city, and I'm often out on town getting drunk in shady bars. And nothing has ever happened to me, except when I got pickpocketed in Bishop Arms. Those bastards. And the same goes for all the millions of tourists that visit Stockholm every year. The gang violence doesn't really affect them, or me. But what if you're not a man like me? What if you're a woman? Well, time to get into some touchy subjects.
Right, is there a difference between being a man and a woman in Stockholm in the sense of, is there more violence towards women in Stockholm? I don't know. Let's see. I mean, okay, there's always going to be a threat to women more so than men. but is there specifically a prevalence of attacks on women in Stockholm? I'd love to know. Let's see.
Okay, let's get into the favorite topic of internet trolls all over the world, Sweden's high rate of sexual crimes. First of all, yes, there is a high statistic of reported sexual assaults in Sweden. One reason is that people report these crimes in Sweden more often than in many other countries, and that's sort of a good thing that they're actually being reported. Another reason is that Sweden counts a lot more as sexual assault compared to many other countries. We have a low tolerance for any undesired physical contact. Okay. And finally, every single incident is reported as a separate crime. That means that if a spouse sexually abuses their partner every day for a month, then it's reported as 30 different crimes. Well, or 28 or 31, you get a point. Many other countries would count this as a single crime, if they even count it at all, since it's between married people. So,
nah, in the UK, we would. I'm pretty sure it would be seen as a separate crime each time, each incident, just like in Sweden. So I don't know if that's an excuse. Sweden, maybe you still have a high, clearly, a high prevalence of sexual assaults on women. That's an issue.
Oh, no, things aren't quite as bad as some people believe. Does this mean that things are good? Absolutely not. Sweden still has horrible statistics compared to the rest of Scandinavia. There's been an increase in violent sexual assaults, and many women report that they now feel unsafe in Sweden compared to, for example, 10 years ago. I'm not a woman, believe it or not, and I can't really comment on how it feels to be a woman in Sweden. So I won't say anything for sure about it all. I'll just say that I believe that a woman would rather walk the streets of Stockholm at night than walk in dark alleys in many other cities.
So in the past 10 years, are people saying in Sweden that this is linked to immigration or mass immigration to Sweden, and that's why the incidences of sexual assault have risen? Let me know.
Now, that was one touchy subject, so let's get even further into the metaphorical excrement creek. Let's talk about immigration. If people aren't talking about Sweden's sexual assault statistics, they're talking about immigrants. Some say that the rise in crime is all to be blamed on the influx of immigrants we've had lately. And others say that that's absolutely untrue, and that it's skewed statistics that leads to that conclusion. Guess what I'm gonna say next? That the truth lies somewhere in between, because things are more complex than that.
Can it be linked to immigrants? Because I don't know, because I feel like reporting to the police, actually trust for police is higher within native populations, right? So in Britain, for example, crimes are more likely to be reported to the police by British white people than they would be with British black people or British Muslims or people of ethnic minorities. They tend to trust the police less. So if there are more crimes reported, clearly these crimes are reported probably more by native Swedes. However, does that mean it's an immigrant that are perpetrating these crimes towards Swedish women? I don't know. It's interesting though.
Sweden has a problem with immigrants. Some say that we've accepted too many, or at least that we've accepted too many from certain groups. Others say that Sweden is to blame for not doing enough to integrate newcomers into society. Either way, it's unfortunately pretty much a fact that immigrants have a high rate of unemployment or lower paying jobs, and that means that they end up in so-called no-go zones in Stockholm. So is it really any surprise that they're highly represented in crime statistics? Or that they are the ones that are targeted for recruitment by gangs? So what's the solution to all of this?
Här kommer
I believe that every society is constantly changing. Sweden today isn't what it was 20 years ago. And it's definitely not the Sweden that I knew when I grew up. But that was true in the 1950s as well. And in the 1800s. Change is inevitable. That said, I can understand if people are worried about the fact that 20% of Sweden's population wasn't born in Sweden. But integration is the key to everything in my view. Sweden is a pretty great country after all, so all we need to do is make everyone understand just how great it is to make everyone Swedishified. And at the same time, maybe we can adopt some
What is that? That looks good. I want some of that.
new things to make it even greater. And if you're joking on that figure of 20% not being born in Sweden, well, Sweden is accepting fewer and fewer immigrants these days, so steps are being taken in that direction too. But I still think that the key point is that we need to make newcomers integrated rather than focus on segregation.
Yeah, that's your problem. That's your problem. Because these communities are isolated and segregated and are confined to a certain part of Sweden, they're not, you know, you're just not going to get to a point where you're going to create Swedes. They're going to keep their nationality and the way things are done in their countries, and they're not going to integrate into Swedish like lifestyle because you're not integrating them properly. So that's what you need to start doing first. And yeah, it's okay to slow down the rate of immigration, but make sure that the people that you already have living there, that you're doing the utmost to make sure that these people are integrated into society or repatriated to their countries, if that's what you would like to do. If you're not able to integrate them, send them home. If they're willing to go home, find a way to send them home. I don't see a problem with that. You know?
It might take time, and we might not end up with the Sweden that we're used to, but in the long run, I think that this is the only viable solution. And that brings me back to this so-called no-go zone in Stockholm, Rinkeby. Today is Rinkeby-festivalen, a festival celebrating the community here, and it's intended to build bridges. Bridges across cultures, bridges across differences, and bridges across problems. Which is pretty ironic because there's a lot of debate over a bridge that connects Rinkeby with nearby Ursvik. People in Ursvik don't want people in Rinkeby to have easy access to their part of town because they believe that it will introduce unwanted people and lower the real estate worth.
That's horrible. Imagine being like, yeah, we don't want those guys coming over here. So can you like not put a bridge there? Can you put a wall? That's not okay. That's what I mean. It's just going to get worse because then they're going to feel like a community and they're going to be confined to their area. And then trust me, it doesn't work. Tried that in England. They tried that in England, tried to ghettoify their areas, keep people confined to their areas. And I think in Britain kind of realised that doesn't really work. And I think they've tried now to kind of integrate people a bit more. Yeah, doesn't work, guys.
So while I can talk all day about my hopes for integration, and that Stockholm doesn't really have any no-go zones, there's still quite a noticeable divide. As a final thought, there's one thing that I haven't really talked about, and that's terrorism. I feel safe in Stockholm and Sweden, but the threat of terrorism is looming over us now. However, that doesn't really have anything to do with how safe Stockholm is as a city, in my view, or Sweden as a country. That's in the hands of lunatics and fanatics. No one can say what's gonna happen, and you can't really plan ahead for things like that. So I'm just gonna continue to feel safe and happy in Stockholm, and I hope that you will as well. And that was my pretty long-winded way of answering the question of how dangerous
I'm very sorry, guys. Actually, the video's finished anyways, but like my computer is actually malfunctioning. I'll be surprised if I'm not frozen on the screen right now. Hopefully not, fingers crossed. But yeah, like he said, just the hope for the future is that you can integrate your population of immigrants And yeah, maybe you do need to slow down the rate of immigration if you're not able to provide the support for the immigrants that are there to get them integrated, and if there is all this friction between the local people and the immigrants that live in the country. It needs to be more harmonious. There needs to be a one Swedish identity where people that live and are permanent residents and are native Swedes to get along in harmoniousness. There's too much dividing in the world. There's too much divide in England. Yeah, I think there's no... And I don't think it's a bad thing to stop immigration. Not stop it completely, but like slow it down if you can't handle the immigrants you have already in your country. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the priority needs to be on Swedish people. Immigrants as well. Swedish immigrants, is that right? Immigrants to Sweden. Without thinking about taking on more. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. Until the next one, I will see you very soon.